perfect segue, man, to conference realignment. And I know everything has been said at this point. I don't think we're breaking any news here. We never do break any news, as you know. But the conferences they've completely shifted to the point of they're irrecognizable. The names are a farce. Everything is a farce. I'm not necessarily anti-conference realignment. I'm still going to watch the product, and it is what it is. This is the future. Anybody who's not down with it, I don't know what to tell you. This is just the future. So you're going to have to worry about watching Oregon play Iowa and Oregon play Illinois. Shout out to Ryan Leskis, but that's just kind of where it's at. But you have a little bit more of a prognostication as it relates to the future of college football. You shared it with me, and I want you to share it with the listeners, and then we can kind of talk about the reality of where we are now.
So I don't know if I'd call it a prognostication. This is more of a theory. It's as I go through this, you're going to realize this is flawed. It's not perfect. There are people that are much smarter than I am that could make this and fine tune it into something that could work. I don't, and I'll also say I have no expectation whatsoever that anything like this is actually going to happen, just because people probably won't make the amount of money that they can manage to make in the way the system is structured now. But we all have to accept that things are changing. College football as we knew it is gone. Conferences as we knew them are gone. Throw geography out the window. Like all the boo-hooing about it, like just this doesn't make any sense. Like that's not a credible argument to me. Well, it just doesn't make sense. Well, what give me some like why not? And I understand like the biggest thing, the most logical argument is that not about football itself, but about the other sports, right? The Olympic sports, the baseball team, the track team, the tennis team, the volleyball team, the wrestling team, whoever, having to travel from Eugene, Oregon to wherever the Rutgers is in New Jersey, right? Like on a weeknight or something. It just doesn't make sense. It's not fiscally responsible. There's a lot of issues with it. Let me give you my pitch for what should happen to major college football. So first and foremost, major college football detaches from the NCAA. They create their own league with a commissioner and a board of directors who are not employed by any university. I don't want athletic directors, presidents, anybody. I understand that these people may happen to be alma maters of different universities, but none of them will be employed by a university. It will be a group of fully independent people. So this league is going to consist of 120 teams. I understand that currently there are 133 Division I FBS football teams. This is going to leave 13 of them out in the cold. I get that. We're going to go with 120 because it creates good even numbers for the rest of my theory and setup here. So 120 teams, they're going to be split into 3 tiers. For the sake of this, we're going to talk about gold, silver, bronze. 40 teams in each tier. Each tier is going to be split into 4 divisions of 10 teams. And those 10 divisions are going to be geographical. So this board of directors is going to determine these divisions based on geography. They will also ultimately create the schedule. It will be similar to how some high school associations work with districts and stuff like that. Like from year to year, they're kind of fluid, and the governing body drafts districts by geography and enrollment and stuff. So enrollment's not a factor here, but geography will be the primary. So this will fix the travel concerns. They will play a 12-game regular season. So they will play 9 games within their own division, and that allows for 3 non-division games. They will play 1 game against each of the other divisions. As far as like how they determine those games, obviously you would have to plan them before the season starts. But whether you pit the better team, the top teams against the perceived top teams or whatever, I don't know. But that's really irrelevant. That can be figured out one way or another. And this all applies for every tier. Each tier will have an 8-team playoff. The top 2 teams from each of the 4 divisions will make the playoff. We could have a bowl set up for the teams that have a good record but do not make the 18 playoff. That's an option, I guess, if you want to keep the whole bowl thing alive. This is the most fascinating thing, in my opinion. The league will operate on a relegation promotion system, similar to what you hear in like the Premier League in Europe for soccer. The bottom 4 teams in each tier will be relegated to the lower tier, and the top 4 teams will be promoted to the upper tier every season. And so I think that, and I will get to this later in more detail, but as far as what you would do with the bottom four teams in the bronze tier. If you just have these perennial bottom feeders, what do you do? I have a plan for that as well. So the league office itself will establish rules, standards, and regulations in regards to academics, recruiting, and player compensation. My idea proposes slotted maximum compensation based off of grade level. Sophomores will make more than freshmen, juniors will make more than sophomores, and so on. And now you don't have to make the maximum, but there is a cap on how much you can make. So obviously, five stars will max out at whatever the highest level a freshman can make. To kind of curb a little bit of the transfer stuff. If you transfer to another school at any point in time, the moment it is your first year at a new university, you get the first year pay. You get freshman pay. So I think you could have some exceptions to this, a coaching change, or perhaps like you could put some playing time requirements in there. Like, let's say you're a freshman, you go to school somewhere, you don't really play much. It's just a bad fit. And so your motive to transfer is just simply like, I want to go somewhere where I fit better. And maybe you played 10 snaps all year. I don't think you should punish someone in that situation. So I think you could maybe set something up that takes care of that. But this is more to get away from the I had a great year, so I'm gonna take the bag of cash to go play for a higher level team next season. Moving on. Violation of league rules could result in being demoted to one of the lower divisions, one of the lower tiers. And I think this would function as sort of a catch-all in terms of punishment due to the decreased revenue that would result from this because of you're going to be a less desirable destination for recruits because you're going to play in a lower tier against lower tiered competition. I think ticket sales could suffer, and then one of the things that I'm going to explain more in a second, lower TV revenue. TV deals will be handled on a tier by tier basis. So the gold tier, they will get the best TV deal, the best networks, the highest level of compensation. If you are in that tier, you're making the most money. Silver tier would be slightly less, still good money. And then obviously, maybe the bronze tier is like the Apple deal the Pac-12 got offered or something like that. But you get what I'm saying. I think that, there are tiers to the TV deals there. And all of this is essentially kind of controlled and legislated by the league office. You're taking university presidents, university administration, conference commissioners out of the equation entirely. This is being handled by a single governing body. So I talked about the bottom four teams in the bronze division. They would be at risk of being removed from the league completely and being replaced. How would they be replaced, you ask? Well, the NCAA would still function as a governing body for collegiate football, but their highest level of football would be some version of what we view now as the FCS. What I would say is teams could apply to join the top tier league. And in the event that there's a team that's going to be removed for lack of competitiveness or rules violations, whatever, or maybe they opt out of it entirely, there would be an application process to promote yourself from the FCS level or whatever that appears to be into this top tier league, which I would truly would envision being like a very few and far in between this happening. But I think it's important to have a process in place for in the event this does occur. The NCAA, again, it still exists, and it operates all of the other sports. And those other sports can operate within their little conferences like we have now, and maybe kind of revert back to more regional conferences that make sense to take care of these travel concerns that everyone has. Also, I think that there's a version of this that could be created for major college basketball as well at some point in time. So ultimately, college football becomes a pro league. It becomes a pro league. It's governed like a pro league. Obviously, there's some extra rules that are going to apply due to the academic factor. I do think it cannot just be the Wild West with recruiting. There has to be some sort of structure to recruiting and compensation, and it has to be something that's enforceable. Sometimes I think that the NCAA, they institute these rules, but it's impossible for them to enforce it on a broad scale. Like now, what the actual answer to that is, I don't know. But I think that you have to make some sort of a structure that is easily understood, easily followed, and if it's violated, it's easy to penalize it. Other than that, I mean, one of the other great ideas that just came up here in the last couple of days, which is it's different than this, but it's kind of in the same vein as Chip Kelly came out and said, "Hey, look at Notre Dame. They're independent. Why aren't we all just independent? We're all just independent, away from all these conferences, make our own schedules and do our own thing, and everybody else, all the other sports can be in a conference." And that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, it kind of applies to this in some way, shape, or form. Now, I don't think this will ever happen, like I said, because there's probably a lot of people in power at different universities that stand to make a lot less money than they make now under this sort of structure. But it was just intriguing to me because I'm a traditionalist and I forced myself to think outside the box in regards to, okay, like what could this really look like moving forward? Because I do feel like it's trending towards something that looks similar to this in some way, shape, or form. Iceman, tell me what you think.
Well, I think that what you're proposing is a little bit more in line with what I think needs to happen. I don't actually care about conference realignment, and even though I'm a traditions guy in a certain sense, I just want to watch some ball, as Budge would say. And I think that what worries me though is the escalation of this. And it's escalating to the point that we're not even done yet. We don't even know what the final dominoes are going to be. And what worries me is that it's going to destroy things like the NCAA tournament, or it's going to destroy things like maybe the NCAA tournament for wrestling, because now we don't know what the future holds for those. What happens when football overtakes everything? Because there are basketball programs, I'm sure, as a part of these schools who are like, we don't want to fly out to Iowa to play basketball. We don't want to have to go to Piscataway, New Jersey to play Rutgers. There you go. That's for you. And I think that what you're proposing, while more like a pro league, I think allows for a little bit more structure. Right now, it's the Wild West. There is no structure. All these conferences, I don't even know if they really have a footprint for what they want, like a runway for where they want to end up. And there's a lot of schools in a lot of these conferences that are being left out in the cold or that are a part of this. I'm looking at Vanderbilt right now, who are going to be beneficiaries of just having been in the SEC for so long. And why? They've been bottom feeders. Colorado is lucky to be in the Big 12 because they have Coach Prime. They're coming off a 1-11 season. But what I hear when you talk about this is that you're basically advocating to almost create like the Champions League, the way that Drew talked about it on Fan to Fan. And I think that it's intriguing. I think there are a lot of things to iron out. Obviously, this is not even close, but I think the bones of what could be are there. And I think married with Chip Kelly's idea of independence, because I think that the other sports should be allowed to just sort of do what they have always done. Football dominates the landscape. So let football dominate it. Let football do what it has to do, secede from the NCAA. Because let's both be honest about this. If I were to ask you, is the NCAA really doing anything or adding any benefit to college football? None at all. None at all. So why are they even here? They're here to make a big mess of this because they're watching this. They have no power to stop any of this, clearly. And so maybe take away their power for this big time college football. And I know that a lot of people, they're used to their old college ways. You're used to seeing Big Ten, Pac 12 in the Rose Bowl, things like that. And I get it. I do. Like, I still want to see those things. We're past the point of no return. There is no returning to any of that. There's no returning to the pageantry of the Rose Bowl. I hate to say it, man, but at this point with this conference realignment, things like the Rose Bowl, the traditions, they mean nothing. They mean nothing. And at least in what you're proposing is basically taking a blank sheet of paper and let's sketch this out starting right now. Will it be perfect at the beginning? Nope. Are there things you're going to have to iron out? Yes. But just like this right now, because I'm telling you, when we get to the final product of this conference realignment, there's going to be all these unintended consequences that we're going to have to say, damn, what do we do now? And that's the part where we need to get there. We don't know what they are. We don't know how many kids are going to be affected, how many families are going to be affected. At least in your model, we're calling a duck, and we're just throwing the money right in the consumer's face.
Yeah, and another thing I like about my idea is the fact obviously I'm a Notre Dame fan, which they're an upper echelon program in college football. I'm an Iowa wrestling fan, they're a successful program. but I'm a Bradley basketball fan, right? Mid-major. So like what I like about this thing is it allows for maybe what you could perceive as like a group of 5 team that has success. It allows them the opportunity to play with the big boys, right? To advance into that next league. And it allows for the Vanderbilts of the world to get relegated back to where they probably belong. And that's those sort of things are probably what will would put the brakes on something like this. And we talk about the other sports, and I think it was Missouri's head coach came out and he had some comments to say about this. And essentially what he said was, as universities, we sit there and we put all these limitations on the players with what they're allowed to do. And even with the transfer portal NIL, like their rights are still limited to some degree and in the same breath, like, the university will just up and move conferences or whatever, like, no big deal, and just imagine, let's say that you're Oregon, and you recruited a kid, and the way that you won that kid is you said, "Hey, listen, throughout your time here, at least once a year, if not twice a year, this kid's from some Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, if not once a year, at least twice a year, we're gonna play in Phoenix, or we're gonna play in Arizona, excuse me. We're gonna play in Arizona. Your parents can come see you play. I get your parents might not be able to get to Eugene, but you know what? They can get to a game when we go play Arizona State or Arizona. That's your pitch, right? That's how you sold that kid is, you know what? Like, we're still gonna get you close to home at least once a year for your folks to see you play. Now here you are shipping off to you're never gonna play those teams again probably unless you get matched up with them in a bowl game or whatever else. It's just funny how when it comes to promises that we expect these young people to be loyal and to keep their word and all these things as institutions of higher learning, right? That want to put themselves on a pedestal once in a while. When it comes to something that could benefit them, they'll turn coat in 2 seconds, man. Gone. No questions asked, no concerns.
Missouri's already an example of that because they jumped ship immediately to go to the SEC. And oh, by the way, the Missouri coach has probably left how many head coaching gigs and left a lot of those recruits out to dry because a better and more lucrative opportunity comes up. I always find it funny whenever coaches, it was like Jimbo Fisher last year talking about the best class money could buy or whatever it was. I can't remember. It was somebody, he was involved. And it's like, I think it was Nick Saban saying that. And it's like, dude, Nick, come on. Like, can we have a little bit more self introspection here? Or him talking about the fairness of NIL and we're an we're an academic institution. Get out of here. Like all these they're all hypocrites. And it's okay. Like I'm okay with that. It's fine. But I always laugh at that stuff because you're right. It's about opportunity. As much praise as we gave Deion Sanders for what he did at Jackson State, we knew he was going to jump at the next gig. And guess what? If Colorado does well, he's going to jump to the next one. And that's just the nature of where we are. It may be amateur in the way that we have placed amateurism on collegiate athletics, but I'm going to tell you something, man. It's capitalism. It's capitalism all day, every day, 365. And until they figure out a way to regulate it or figure out a way to, I guess, give it some structure, I don't know where it's headed, but it's funny because the Pac-12 is gone, right? Or it's the Pac-4 now. You notice that I think all four of the schools that are left are all the most like academically savvy ones in the conference. I find that to be very, very funny. Stanford and Cal, and I'm like, nobody wants them. That's interesting. And so there's just so much that is left to be decided, and it's not going to be decided this year. But I'm going to tell you, look, is it going to stop us from watching the product? No, we're still going to watch. And I'd watch if it was this. And I think it's an interesting idea. I would love to hear what the listeners have to say. So you know the number to do that if you want to call or text us. And is your school affected by this? I mean, Virginia Tech's not. We're still sitting in the ACC, mediocre as all hell. And Notre Dame is still independent. So we're both able to just continue to consume our teams the way we always have. But I would love to hear the perspective of some of these fan bases. Like, does Oregon care about playing anybody else besides Michigan and Ohio State? Like, does it matter? Things like that. I don't know. It's just fascinating to me how all of this is going to play out. If you are hoping that it goes back to something more traditional, you're going to be waiting a long time. What's the saying? You can wish in one hand, shit in the other. And guess what? It is what it is now. So college football is ever changing. But if anybody needs a sponsor for this new league, I think the Iceman and Coach League sounds really, really good. I think we'd be great commissioners. And obviously, the coach would be relegating and firing people left and right to create this new empire that you have proposed to us.